Do you still love me or not?
I've been sitting here trying to find the right angle to minimize glare on my glasses, but I think we're just gonna have to go with it. I'm sorry. Hi, welcome to Frankly K, or Frankly Loverly. This is Financial Frankly, where we talk about financial literacy, news, and general things of that nature, because awareness and clarity means power. And this is Frankly Loverly, where I do book reviews one day, journal with me's a little bit, financial literacy videos, and vlogs. So if that's interesting to you, please take a moment and subscribe. It is free. I want to get to 100 people. 100 people to come to the Midnight Pulp Party. That's what this place is called. This is the Midnight Pulp Party. Today is just a bunch of news compilations from May. Some frustrating news that people should be aware of. And in case you don't keep up with those things, here I am to help you do it. But let's start with what you probably clicked on this video for, and it's to talk about PALANTIR. I've mentioned briefly on this channel investing with a conscience. Investing in things that, aren't detriments to society as you know it, or at least keeping your personal and community interests at the forefront of advancement and investment. So in this case, PALANTIR, if you are on the internet at all, which I assume you are, because here you are, you would have seen PALANTIR. It gets pushed so hard. It gets pushed so hard as like an up and coming tech that's going to take everything by storm. And it's been growing astronomically, especially within this year. I feel like I've seen it more this past year than ever, like 2024, beginning 2025. I've seen it more now than ever. So this isn't to be like, how dare you? It's more to be like, if you have it, or if you've thought about PALANTIR, this is something that you should know about them when making your decision about conscious investing. I think maybe I'll do a whole nother video on conscious investing. I don't really know. I'll save that dissertation for that video. PALANTIR. I will put up a clip. I will put up a little bit of what NPR had put up on Instagram about PALANTIR.
Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, is tapping a secretive tech company to speed up deportations. The company is called PALANTIR, named for the Seeing Stones in The Lord of the Rings. It's not a household name, despite the company now being worth more than Verizon and Disney. PALANTIR's AI software is used by the Israel Defense Forces to strike targets in Gaza. It's used to assist the Department of Defense to analyze drone footage. And it's now helping the Trump administration with immigration enforcement. ICE records show PALANTIR recently received a $30 million contract to create a master immigration database. It would track migrant movements in real time. PALANTIR declined NPR's request for comment, but the company has justified its contracts in the past by saying it is nonpartisan, having worked across multiple administrations. Michael McGrath used to be the CEO of one of PALANTIR's competitors. He said it is true that both Democratic and Republican administrations have provided work to PALANTIR, since it has cemented a reputation in Washington for cutting-edge surveillance and data mining tech.
Okay, so after I saw that video, it became kind of a concern. So I started looking into it a little bit, just a little bit. And it's not that PALANTIR hasn't been doing this before. Because of what they have a track record of in business and what they have capabilities of doing, everyone, AI powered is really like buzzwords right now. Like everyone's putting AI in front of everything, and it kind of just means like an automated interface. So it just means like they've made a program. Somebody's made a program, made some software that helps them automate their services, which include a lot of data analytics and a lot of database organization, storage, and stuff like that. And the main concern right now is that those skill sets from PALANTIR are being used quite dubiously by our current administration. And before anybody comes on here and is like, well, they also said they've been working nonpartisan. In that video, they do mention that Palantir said that they work in a bipartisan manner, meaning they haven't only been working with one person. And it's like, yeah, because you're a company. Like, you're going to go where the money goes. So that is that. And it's not saying that it's right either way. Like, what's that phrase? The path to hell is paved with good intentions. And you could consider Palantir like that, even if you're not trying to demonize Palantir, which I am not. They're just a company doing what companies do, and that's called get money. So as you connect all these things, it starts to leave a trail of what ifs. And while you don't have to blame Palantir for doing business as they've always done business, you do have to look at yourself in wondering whether you're going to keep supporting a business that's doing business as usual, even if the business is becoming unusual. Okay, so that's just something to think about that we talked about at the top of the hour. So let's get into the rest of the news now. The rest of the news has everything to do with the CFPB. Now, if you haven't been here before, that is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I have talked about them, I think, at length in another video, probably last year at this point. I was talking about all the great things that they do and why they're so necessary. I think I talked about them again because at the beginning of the year, because of all the things that were happening where they were like stopping them from being able to do their jobs and being able to basically audit different financial institutions and, you know, push on enforcing regulations. So let me just read this real quick. In January, proposed preventing agreements and contracts from containing language in which the signers opt out of or waive federal and state consumer protection laws, among other changes. So the CFPB wanted to make sure that when financial institutions draft these contracts that you guys, the consumers, sign, they weren't allowed to put that you can opt out your protection laws and other stuff. They wanted to prevent that. However, they now are withdrawing those things. Mind you, they're withdrawing all those things because they are under new leadership. That leadership that was appointed by the new president. The Bureau cited its authority to prohibit acts or practices that are unfair, deceptive, or abusive under the Dodd-Frank Act, or the UDAPP. Oh, the UDAPP is essentially what I just read. Is the unfair deception and, what is it? The unfair deception or abusive practices protection? Something like that. Unfair or deceptive acts or practices. I believe that's it. So it's UDAAP. Why are they saying UDAPP? It might have just been a typo on the American Banking Journal. However, the American Bankers Association argued that the CFP does not have the authority that it claimed in correcting that language. And of course they would, because that benefits them. Again, I'm not here to, down talk banks. I'm just here to tell you guys that sometimes, right, an entity is going to look out for itself. An entity is always going to look out for itself, and things that don't make it easier for them to do what they feel that they need to do. They might have looked at this and been like, fine, we won't put the opt-out thing there, but they don't want someone telling them to not put it there. These are two different things. So it's not to say that the bank, now I'm not to say that they're not saying this, but I'm also not saying that they are saying this, that the bank is like, we don't want to be able to not have people take our fucking practices however. But we don't want to be able to not do what we want. It's not necessarily that. It's more along the lines of, we want to be able to do what we think is in the scope of our rights without somebody telling us we can't. But that's the whole reason why it's dangerous, because without outside regulation, some people in the industry might be thinking that one thing's okay while other banks are thinking that, it's not okay. And so something like the CFPB kind of keeps everyone under certain brackets in a uniform sense of responsibility, like holds people accountable in a uniform manner. instead of everyone kind of holding themselves accountable in the manner in which they're accustomed. Okay. And this is one of those things. It says the Bureau believes it's necessary to withdraw the proposed rule, depending further consideration of whether the Bureau has the authority to issue it. So basically, it's under question because they're trying to say that the CFPB, this is not their jurisdiction. Like, you don't get to tell us what language to use in our documents. And the CFPB previously had said, yes, we do. This is exactly what's part of our jurisdiction. So that's the argument right now, but they're withdrawing it for now. We'll see how far it goes. Also, they said that they were rescinding dozens of guidance documents as part of a directive by President Trump to reduce regulation. Among the rescinded guidance was the 2024 circular on whether unlawful or unenforceable terms and conditions in contracts for terms and conditions in contracts for consumer financial products and services violate the UDAAP. Why do they keep saying UDAPP? Hold on, now I got to look it up because I'm pretty sure it's UDAAP. I might be talking about the UDAP, which is the unfair or deceptive acts or practices, which is under the FTC Act. And also the one I keep saying, which is the UDAAP, because it's unfair or deceptive acts or practices, and then there's unfair, deceptive, or abusive acts or practices. I knew I wasn't crazy. I had to go Google that because I'm like, I am not crazy. It is UDAAP or just UDAP. There's no two P's. Anyway. So the CFPB was now withdrawn this proposed rule to prohibit those provisions that let them say you're waiving your rights, basically. So the former director, who I think stepped down so that he could run for like Congress or whatever in his home state, and I don't know if he lost or whatever, I don't care. If Congress had intended the CFPA to permit states to enforce any provision of any federal consumer financial law, it would have said so explicitly. So that's why he decided he was going to rescind that rule while he was there. And then for the state enforcement, it was about the, so the CFPB, they also rescinded, saying that state regulators and state attorneys general have enforcement authority with regard to all provisions of the Consumer Financial Protection Act. And basically, the leadership, right, that I just mentioned, the director Chopra, he was basically saying like they didn't explicitly say that was a thing, so we're not going to do that anymore. Basically, I mean, in my opinion, right, I'm not law. Like I've said this before, I'm not law, I'm not a lawyer, even though like when I was little, none of that matters. I'm only coming from regulations and compliance from inside a retail setting, a retail like banking setting. So I would like to know, but like it just seems like it is something for, especially given on where the bank is in its like tier, like if it's like one of these really large banks, it's a really large bank, a mid-sized bank, a community bank, a credit union, any kind of other financial institution, there are certain ones where I feel like at the state level there should be some state enforcement for these laws, especially because each state has different consumer protection laws in the first place. So it's just something that's weird to say that the state should have no say in regulating the banks that are operating within their state, especially when each bank, in order to do business in a state, they have to start understanding the compliance and regulations of said state. So it just makes it weird for him, the former director, to be like, no one ever said that was a thing. And it's like, well, they kind of did. It's one piece of news. Let me get that up. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Chapter 10. Now, the interpretive rules, policy statements, and advisory opinions withdrawal. This is an addendum to what I was just talking about. And the agency, the CFPB, the action, withdrawal of Bureau guidance, interpretive rules, policy statements, and advisory opinions. Basically, their entire job. Okay, so then it says summary. The CFPB is withdrawing many guidance documents issued since the CFPB assumed its functions in 2011. 2023 policy statement on how the CFPB determines abusive acts or practices. See, abusive acts or practices, that means they meant the UDAAP and they kept putting UDAPP. Somebody need to spell check. That was driving me crazy. Y'all was trying to make me seem like I was crazy. Anyway, a 2022 interpretive rule describing states' authorities to pursue companies and individuals that violate federal consumer financial protection law. Those two things were the things I just talked about. 2024 circular on whether unlawful or unenforceable terms and conditions and contracts for consumer financial products and services violate the prohibition on deceptive acts or practices in the Consumer Financial Protection Act. A 2024 advisory opinion to remind debt collectors of their obligation to comply with the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act and the collection of medical debts. Remember, that was one of those really big topics that I was talking about before. A 2023 advisory opinion reminding large banks and credit unions to comply in a timely manner to customer requests for information about their accounts. I'll put the link to the PDF under here. It's written in pretty plain language if you want to take the time to skim over it. But it's basically just talking about how they have new policies and the fact that they want to be able to consider and review all the policies that they've put out so far. And so they're trying to withdraw the different guidance materials because, one, they want to make sure that it's not doing too much, like not increasing costs. Like, that's a big thing with this administration. They keep talking about costs of stuff, and like people who are liking what this administration is doing are basically liking it because they're being told that costs are being taken care of. So they go on to quote different reasons. That was one of the reasons why they said that they're rescinding things for review, rescinding their guidance documents for review. The other reason was they need to figure out the interpretations of the documents and make sure that they're all doing what they are allowed to do. They need to make sure that it doesn't increase, or whether they need to make sure whether it imposes or decreases compliance burdens. And the alternative was to leave the guidance documents in place while they review each interpretation and determine its net effect on compliance burdens, risks imposing unnecessary and illegal compliance burdens in the interim. The Bureau rejects that alternative. So basically they were like, no, we're not going to leave these things in place while we review them. We're going to rescind everything and review our documents to make sure they're not compliance burdens. And I just want to know what exactly they mean as a compliance burden. Like, and then it goes on to talk about how because the administration and the president want to streamline government basically into an authoritarian funnel. They didn't put that last part, but that's what that means. They're trying to figure out whether they even have a place in the government. That's the bottom line. They're trying to figure out whether they even have a place, whether they are a necessary bureau. Remember at the beginning of this, I told you that he couldn't shut the whole thing down, but he could stop everything that they were doing. And essentially that's what this is. Basically putting a kibosh on all their activities in legal terminology, basically saying, well, we're only rescinding to review and then have the review pending for the next 4 years or whatever. But yeah, you can go ahead and read the rest of it. It was all bullshit. 2 circulars on the legality of unanticipated overdraft fee assessment practices and improper overdraft opt-in practices. And that brings us to the next topic. One of the things that they were taking away is the fact that very large banks had to cap their overdraft fees at a certain price. So now I believe, if I can find that article, it might not apply to even your bank because it depends on where your bank lines up. Your bank might be considered a community or a local bank or small or a mid-sized bank, and I think it was banks that were large, valuated over 10 billion or 10 million or something like that, has signed into law overturning the CFPB's limits on overdraft fees, passed as a Congressional Review Act resolution last month. This is an article from May 9th. And championed by American Banking Association on Capitol Hill. The resolution means that the CFPB cannot take issue a similar rule in the future. I guess they mean cannot take issue of a similar rule in the future. The CFPB overdraft rule, now voided, required banks with at least $10 billion in their assets to cap overdraft fees at $5 unless they voluntarily set a cap that covers their actual costs and losses to treat overdraft protection as a loan covered by the Truth in Lending Act. So if the bank is over 10 billion, you should be aware that, any kind of overdraft reprieve that you were seeing has now been rescinded. So that was the importance of the CFPB, keeping things like that. And then apparently the resolution says that they can't bring this back up. If I'm understanding that correctly, it says they can't bring it back up in the future. So that's dead in the water. You're going to have to basically go with a bank just wanting to do the right thing. It's not unheard of, but we'll see how many people, now that it's not an enforceable law or a regulation, we'll see how many people think it's the right thing to do when they don't have to, because they had a law case against the CFPB. But what stuck out to me was them saying that it preserves access to the essential financial lifeline for millions of Americans who need it. And I guess they're trying to refer to the fact that, like, overdraft protection, like when they give you a line of credit. So back when Wells Fargo used to be Wachovia, they used to have this thing where you could, like, take money, about 300, I think, depending on your account, even just a regular basic account. At the time, I had just a regular basic Wachovia account, and you could withdraw up to like $300 basically on an overdraft. And then when you put the money in, it just ate the money up and called it a day. But you also were charged overdraft fee. So that was that. And honestly, that's one thing, but I feel like them trying to spin it like this overdraft fees were the ones covering these lines of credit makes no sense, because you covered your line of credit. If you didn't pay them back, you had a negative in your account and any money that went in there. And I think you had to have a direct deposit in order for that to go through. And direct deposit wasn't all that common back then. I mean, when we talking about when it was Wachovia, this is a little bit ago, that the same people that will charge accounts that have no money are going to open up these lines of credit that are, overdraft protection or whatever. I doubt they're going to give, because those things are case by case. The bank decides. That's not an automatic thing that comes with accounts. The bank decides whether they're going to honor those kinds of things. So it's not even a guarantee, but you're saying that it is an essential financial lifeline. Like, it's not. It's not an essential financial lifeline. Actually, it was quite predatory, because it took advantage of the fact that people are scraping dollar after dollar together and just need a little more money. And then you just put yourself in a hole to get out of the next time you need more money. So it's not like it gave you any time. Like with a standard credit card, if you had $300, you have at least the month cycle within the cycle to pay it back. These things, if you didn't pay them back within the next week or so, you started getting charged your overdraft fees, and they will charge you every day. So I mean, I don't want to hear that. Like, it's basically just another excuse to charge people more money. Again, that's how they got up to evaluate their assets at 10 billion, I guess. Yeah, so that's the end of the news. I know I just said a bunch of things that pissed me off, but I mean, that's just the news for today. I have a topic, the topic I was talking about earlier, which I'll bring up again, right? And we can talk about it again. So that'll be that. But thanks for watching. I will put the link down in the description for that statement from the CFPB, and possibly the links to these other articles as well, in case you wanted to read them for yourself, just so you can see. This website is another source of financial information, and of course they take it from the side of bankers and lobbyists. But again, I hesitate to say bankers, because there's a lot of bankers out here that actually don't agree with how maybe the executive management side of banking, large institutional banking, does things. Like your neighborhood banker, I'm not sure that they'd be excited about this kinds of stuff if they know about it. I would hope they're keeping up with those kinds of things, because these are the kinds of things we have to talk to people about when they come in to discuss matters. So most of we keep up, but I wouldn't shy away from having these discussions with your banker in a civilized manner, because I need you guys to remember that the people that work in the bank aren't the ones making the rules for the bank. Okay, they're just working there trying to pay their bills. All right, and I guess that goes back to investing, because a lot of people are investing their time in companies that are acting unscrupulously. And one of the main things, I think, in a capitalistic society, one of the main and underrated and unrecognized sources of currency is human labor. So, I mean, working at a company that does not value the community that you identify with can also be considered an investment that's not worth it. Like it's a non-conscious investment. So conscious investing could also include where you invest your time. And I'm not telling people to just run out and quit their jobs. That's ridiculous. And like, in this economy, I am telling you to make the best of the situation that you're in. And if you see somebody working in these places, give them a little time and a little grace, because it's hard to find a job out here. So I'm not going to blame anyone for doing what they have to do to go by. I am here to say that people who make the rules, this is what's going on. This is what's happening. Like, this is coming down from a government standpoint. So, like I also said in the beginning, a business is going to business. You can't fault a business for doing exactly what it thinks it needs to do. However, you can decide whether you want to participate in that business in the myriad of ways in which you are accustomed. Okay? So thanks for watching. Invest consciously. That means money, time, effort, heart. Okay? Bye. Do you still love me or not?
I need 7 outside.